The Faith and Fishing podcast is sponsored by 413 Lure Company. 413 Lure Company is a family-owned and operated business that puts Christ first and does things the right way. Using really high-quality components, they make some really awesome spinnerbaits, buzzbaits, bladed swim jigs, and more in some really sweet color combinations. Check them out on Facebook to see what they can do and place your order today. Welcome to the Faith and Fishing podcast, where you get to hear all kinds of fishermen tell their stories and share their faith. I'm your host, Cam Steele. Hello and welcome back to the Faith and Fishing podcast. I'm your host, Cam Steele, and before we start this week's interview, I just wanted to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you all for making Season 1 of the Faith and Fishing podcast a success. This is the last episode of Season 1 and the last episode in the weekly format. Starting next month, we are moving to a monthly format where there will be a new episode coming out the second Tuesday of every month. One quick housekeeping thing I wanted to mention before we start is that the podcast now has a website. Please go check it out at faithandfishing.wixsite.com/podcast. That's faith, the letter N, fish, the letter N, .wix site.com/podcast. There you can listen to all of the episodes of the podcast, follow links to our show sponsor 413 Lure Company, learn more about the podcast and myself, and you can keep up with the new blog. I don't know how often new blog posts will be published yet, but it will definitely be something fun to check out in between episodes. There will also be a contact page on the website where you can reach out to me and let me know who you want to hear from on the podcast. Or if you would like to come on the podcast and share your story, please reach out. Now into the interview. This week we have Luke Stocking on the call. Luke is the Deputy Director of Public Engagement with Caritas Canada, Development and Peace. Luke, man, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I can't believe a show like this exists. It's so cool.
Well, thank you. And so to start us out, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to our listeners? Tell us a little bit about who you are and about what you do with Development and Peace.
Sure. So my name's Luke Stocking, and I work with an organization called Development and Peace, Caritas Canada. I'm the Deputy Director of Public Engagement. We are a Canadian organization belonging to the Catholic Church. And as the Canadian member of the Caritas network, which is a worldwide network, we're actually part of the second largest humanitarian aid network in the world after the Red Cross. And I've been working with Development and Peace since 2006. And I've loved every minute of it. We have two main aspects to our mission. So one is to support groups, partners in the global south, so Africa, Asia, Latin America, and the Middle East. We operate in over 30 countries throughout the world, and we support them in finding alternatives to unjust social and economic structures. So we do development work, working to identify obstacles to development. Within communities that the partners operate in, and finding alternatives to help overcome those. And then we also educate Canadians on the root causes of poverty and injustice in the world, using our Catholic faith as a lens. And that's part of the work that I'm involved in. I work in our In Canada program, so doing public engagement in Canada. And we try to, everybody kind of has it in them, I think, when they see suffering in the world that they want to do something. And so we are the part of the Catholic Church that when somebody looks at the world here in Canada says, when I see hunger in the world, when I see poverty, when I see people affected by war, I want to do something. What can I do? We're the part of the Catholic Church that says, here's what you can do. And that begins with educating ourselves on why these things are happening in the first place. And for us as people of faith, why we think, that we need to do something and what we can do. So we engage people here in doing fundraising for our projects overseas, but also doing education and advocacy work. So sometimes that means actually lobbying the government in Canada to change certain practices that impact people overseas. It's great work. And also I should say, I don't know if you want me to talk about, my love of fishing as well too, Cam, at this point, or just about my job. Sometimes in my job I actually get fish. We
That's
do
awesome.
leadership camps sometimes out, and actually I think that's how I met another one of your guests, Mike Consul. So, but yeah, I've been a fisherman much longer than I've worked at development and feed since I was a little kid. Always loved it.
Okay, and what was it that got you into fishing?
Well, when I was like, I must have been, 3 or 4. I have a very distinct memory of my grandparents had a cottage. I think they had rented it, and I was there fishing off a dock with my dad. And I didn't have a fishing rod at the time. I remember he got this it was like one of these antennas off of like the old cars that had huge antennas, and that was my first fishing rod with this antenna. And I remember fishing off of the dock with this antenna, and I caught a bass. And I was just like the most thrilling thing in the world. And then when I was not long after that, we moved to the country. I was born in Toronto, the capital of Ontario, but we moved to a little town called Uxbridge, about an hour northeast of there. And we had a 50-acre farm, and there was a pond on the farm, and my dad stocked that pond with rainbow trout. And so, I grew up fishing in our pond, and when I learned fishing was a sport, I used to tell people that fishing was my favorite sport. So, what better thing is there to do in life than to go out in nature on the water and to relax with a fishing rod, but then also to have that excitement of a fish hitting your line and catching a fish. And yeah, it's just, I've always loved it since I was a little kid.
That's awesome. All right, man. So in a nutshell, what is it that you believe in?
Well, I've always been really drawn to the line in the Lord's Prayer, the Our Father, that I think really speaks to my spirituality, and that's the line that says, "Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven." And the way I was raised to understand who God is and what it means to be a child of God, when I look at the world, when I'm presented with the terrible injustices that exist and the suffering of so many people, and I ask myself, is this what the kingdom of God looks like? Is this God's will? Everything I know about who God is tells me, no, it is not. And therefore, that I've never subscribed to a belief in a God who says, suffer here and you'll have your reward in heaven. That line in the Our Father, on earth as it is in heaven. I've always believed in a spirituality that is trying to make the love of God and God's presence and the reign of God be visible on earth, to realize God's will on earth. And to me, that means bringing about just relationships, just relationships between people, between communities, between nations. And I think that's what I've discerned as my vocation in life, really. And I've had a number of experiences that have pointed me in that direction. We have something in the Catholic faith that's called we call them the social teachings of the church, Catholic social teachings. And I've discerned a vocation in my life to tell people about those teachings, to share those particular teachings, that particular aspect of our Catholic faith, and to try and put it into action in my own life, and to inspire others to do so as well.
Awesome.
And I also believe Jesus was a fisherman. So I believe that, I believe that Jesus had a very intimate relationship with nature. And I guess they say Jesus was a carpenter, but there's lots of stories of him fishing, and he was a very good fisherman too, from the stories we have in the Bible. So,
yeah, for sure.
Jesus was always teaching us about God, using the stories from creation. All the parables are filled with imagery from nature and relationship to nature.
Absolutely. All right. So, you've mentioned it a couple times, about the injustice in the world and seeing all of these things and wanting to do something about it. Are you able to kind of give us an example of what Development and Peace is able to do to help us that want to know, help us learn what it is that we can do?
Sure. So I think one of the things that distinguishes Development and Peace and some other Catholic international development agencies like us is that when we don't believe that the reason why there's poverty in the world or there's injustice is that just like poor or more impoverished countries just haven't caught up to us yet, and that really solving problems of poverty is just about trying to bring everybody up to the same material levels of consumption and that we enjoy in the quote unquote developed world. So we start with people who want to do something. We start by trying to invite them to have an analysis of why are things the way they are, to recognize that there is actually a connection between the wealth that we enjoy in the quote unquote again developed world and the poverty that others suffer. And often we can use some very simple examples to try and illustrate that to people understand. So for example, if I'm going to be able to buy bananas for 50, 60 cents a pound, well, somebody's got to pick those bananas in another part of the world for, next to nut for dollars a day. So recognizing that there's a connection between, the cheap prices that we can pay and the fact that, many of our brothers and sisters who live in global south are paid next to nothing for their labor, in order to provide us with those goods. So, helping people to see the connection. In Canada, we actually have one of the largest, we're one of the biggest players when it comes to the extractive sector. So, mining, and we've seen that there's a lot of environmental and human rights abuses that are carried out by companies with ties to the Canadian extractive sector in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. And, so for example, we have partners in Honduras who are struggling, to support communities who are living in poverty. And, the first thing you might think, okay, well, we need to, teach them how to farm or something like that. And we're like, no, the first thing we know how to farm. We know how to we know how to provide for ourselves, but we can't do that when, your mining company is coming into our country and, poisoning our rivers. So how are we supposed to fish when, what we need we don't need your money to teach us how to farm. We need you to stop your mining company from, poisoning our rivers, for example. So we start by helping people to see the connections and inviting them to try and, and to work to solve the kind of structural problems. Often that means doing political advocacy work. So for example, on this issue of, what mining companies are doing in other parts of the world, we not only invite people to raise money to support projects in countries, in the global south, but also to try and influence our government to regulate our own mining companies and how they operate overseas. Now, so that's just one simple example. But the point I'm trying to make is we start by getting people to realize that it's not. In order to really do something, it means really rethinking the world and rethinking the way we relate to each other on this planet between, quote unquote, again, rich countries and poor countries. So, and so we're able to build what we call relationships of solidarity between people who are struggling for justice in their own countries and people who want to join that struggle for justice here in Canada. And that means providing financial support. So for example, another example would be in Bolivia. There are a lot of indigenous people who work in very precarious and really slave-like conditions as domestic laborers. And rather than say raising money to give so that an indigenous person could have it go to school and have an education, or sponsor them to give them money or something like that. Recognizing the structural problem there, we supported a partner that helped to introduce stronger laws within Bolivia to protect those people, who are working as domestic workers. So assisting groups, who have a vision for how to solve problems in their own country, but sometimes don't have the financial resources to be able to do it. And that's where we come in to help provide some of those financial resources. Now that said, those are kind of long-term issues that we work on, but we also recognize that, when there are natural disasters or human disasters like war, people need immediate assistance. And so we also do that as well too. Through the Caritas network, when there is an earthquake, people need medical attention. They need food. They need water. We're able to provide those things as well too. In fact, when Typhoon Haiyan hit the Philippines in 2013, for example, within 24 hours of the typhoon hitting, we were, through the Catholic Church, we were able to provide funds to our partners on the ground that were able to convert that money into concrete help for people. So it's kind of like addressing immediate issues where people, need food, need medical attention, but also working on the longer term issues and also the global interconnected structures that also contribute to this kind of poverty and injustice in the world as well.
Okay, awesome.
So, in a nutshell, we invite people here in Canada who will get involved with us to join us in educating themselves about why these things exist, to invite them to consider our analysis of why things exist, and to work to address both the structural causes of this poverty in the world by changing their own lives, their own habits, and advocating on behalf of people with our own governments or corporations that affect people overseas, while also attending to people's immediate needs as well too, and making a difference.
Awesome. All right, man. So, if you would, you've mentioned your Catholic faith a few times already. If you would, tell us how it is that you came to believe in that. Tell us, was that something you were born into with your family, or was that something that you discovered on your own?
Yeah, no, there's a term that we have called cradle Catholic. So, I'm what you call a cradle Catholic. I was born into a Catholic family. It's always been part of my life now. As Catholics, we have a number of sacraments that mark, an important part of our spiritual lives. We're beginning with that. I don't remember the day I was baptized because I was an infant, but starting with baptism, and then we have our first communion, where we become old enough to receive the Eucharist at Mass, and then we also have a sacrament called confirmation, which is often received when you're around like grade 8, and confirmation is often a time that we describe as when you kind of make the faith your own. You're old enough to really confirm, you're confirmed if you're old enough to confirm that you want to live your life as a Catholic. And so, and when I was around, you go through, when I was around that age, I would say I had a few spiritual experiences that really confirmed the role and the importance of God in my life. It's kind of a little bit trite the way some of those experiences, not really profound, but they still have profound impact on me. So, as an example, like one of them was like I played soccer. I actually thought I was to be a professional soccer player. That was my goal in life. So I was like in high school, and this team that I was playing for, we had a really big game. And we needed to win in order to get promoted to the next league. And we were losing 2-0, and like 5 minutes left in the game, and I prayed to God that we could come back and make it, and we scored 2 goals in the last 2 minutes and tied the game, and that's all we had to do, and we got promoted. Now it sounds really funny, but for like, a 13-year-old kid, that actually had an impact in my life in terms of, there were little things. So some are not so profound like that, but just moments where I, though, then also started to really recognize God's presence in my life. And then as I discovered, in particular, certain dimensions of the faith, in particular for what our faith teaches us for how to be with others in the world, and also implications for how we should relate to each other as societies or as nations. It just more and more made sense to me. So what was kind of what I received as a child, I embraced as an adult. And I really, I should say also, I really, over the course of that journey have just, I don't know how else to describe it other than to say that, it's the way of understanding reality that makes the most sense to me and feels right.
Absolutely. So, what would you say it means to you to have faith?
Beauty, the beauty that I see in the world, the beauty of creation, the beauty of people, the magnificence of creation, the awesomeness of it, when you see everything down to, the intricacies of the tiniest creatures, to the like majesty of, mountains and waterfalls, just the kind of so there's that, but also really, the presence and existence of love between people. It just affirms to me the existence of an all-powerful and all-loving God.
All right, so we are going to start transitioning back towards the water here. So are there any specific times out on the water that have affected your faith in any way?
I would say it's like, being in, you connect to the beauty of God and the peacefulness of God when you're, there's nothing like, it's almost like a prayer, going out on perfectly still waters to do some surface fishing for bass on a quiet morning with the mist coming up and the sun rising. It's like, yeah. So there's definitely that element, that general sense of connecting to God's creation that enriches my faith when I'm out fishing. I also the company, I think of when I think of Jesus being with his disciples, and going out on the water, to me, I actually enjoy fishing with other people more than I enjoy fishing just on my own. I really love the experience of being out with others, sharing that experience with others. Many wonderful conversations about God, about who we are, why are we here as people, I've had when I'm out fishing, with other people. So those moments. Also, getting to, I have two kids, fishing with my children, teaching them what I know about fishing with them, is also a, opportunities to teach them about life and about God, is really enriching for me as well too. And then of course, there's the, again, silly examples that kind of like, okay, God, on this cast, I'm going to catch a fish. And, 9 times out of 10, God doesn't come through, but that one time that it happens, it's pretty magical.
Absolutely.
Like, the story where Jesus tells his disciples, cast your net on this side of the boat. I'll often be like, okay, God, where do I cast? Tell me where to cast.
Awesome. All right, so let's share some fishing stories. What fishing story or memory means the most to you?
Geez, so many to choose from. I'll share a recent one that was pretty funny. So I actually have had some kind of philosophical conversations with my daughter about whether fish feel pain or not. She went through a phase recently where she felt like fishing was cruel because fish, didn't want to fish. And anyways, long story short, eventually once we were up in a place called the Muskokas, and there was an opportunity to fish, and I convinced her to, or I said, oh, do you want to come fishing with me? I know you're not too into the fishing right now. And she's like, okay, yeah, I'll come with you. And I said, oh, really? I was surprised. I was surprised she actually was going to be willing to come with me. And she said, I realized bonding time with my dad is more important than whatever dislike I have of fishing. So, so it was just this very sweet moment where, my daughter was recognized that this is a way that I wanted to bond with her and embraced it. So we're out there, we're fishing, and I've never actually caught a big pike in my life. I've caught some pike before, I've caught pike, but never any big ones. And so my daughter cast a line, and I turned to do something, and then she shrieked, and I looked and I saw the line shooting across the water, and she had a bigger pike on the line than I'd ever caught in my life. And she's shrieking, she's screaming, she's terrified. She's holding up, and she wanted to give me the rod, and I coached her. I was like, it's okay, you can do it. And she got it right up to the dock, and I realized I didn't have a net, and it was I was not going to be able to grab this thing. And I'm trying to think of how do I get her out of the water, and plus also deal with her, cause she's screaming, she's got this huge fish. And fortunately, I guess God had mercy on me. and the fish, like with a shake of its head right at the dock, shook the lure out of its mouth and took off. Which is great too, because it means we had no photographic evidence. So every time I tell the story, the fish can get bigger and bigger and bigger. Right now, it's up to about 15,000. But it was just, it's just a kind of a crazy moment of, of course, it's going to be my daughter, who barely has ever fished, doesn't even really like fishing, is only doing it to bond with her dad. Of course, she's going to be the one who catches the monster pike. So. Now in Canada, we've got the benefit of winter, so we actually, like Jesus, can walk on the water, just only when it's frozen. So I turned 40 this year, and for my 40th birthday, my brothers and my dad took me for a weekend of ice fishing up on in an area called North Bay. And so we went out, and I'd never done overnight fishing before, but you get this cabin, and you're in the cabin for 2 nights, and just fishing for like 48 hours straight was amazing. And 72 hours actually. And it was great to like celebrate my 40th birthday fishing with my dad and my brothers. And I wanted to do it like classy. So, I wanted to have like a really fancy meal with the fish that we caught. And so we looked up some really nice recipes for walleye and pike, and set the table. And I brought up, like, we brought up way more equipment than you normally would take, but most of that equipment wasn't fishing equipment. I brought like nice tablecloths and really nice plates and cutlery, and like we had like a whole like candles, and we had like nice wines, and we even brought suits, and we got dressed up. So we like had this like super fancy dinner in this ice hut in the middle of nowhere, with the fish that we caught, and to celebrate my 40th. And it was a lot of fun.
That's
and I've
awesome.
never also been able to like lie in bed and sleep and fish at the same time. You could lie there in your cot, with a rod strapped to your arm, and so it was great. Again, like I'm saying, a lot of the most valuable times that enrich my faith, when I'm fishing, it comes from the joy of sharing those experiences with other people.
For sure, and you've touched on it already a little bit, but whenever you're out fishing with someone, what's your typical conversation centered around?
Oh, it could be everything from, it depends on, who I'm with, obviously, but it can be as banal as like, hey, what lures are working really well right now? What should we do? How are we going to get these fish to bite? To like, what's the meaning of life? Why are we here? Or what are, what's going on in your life right now? How are you doing? Like, what's going on for you? What are you, you can share when you're out, just sitting with a line out, and the fish aren't on, it's quiet, you can start to talk about, what, like, sharing, what's going on in your life. How are your relationships doing? What's the meaning of life? I've I have some work colleagues that I like to fish with. So we'll be out and we'll be talking about, like, how are we going to really make, the mission of DMP successful in the world? And that mission is it's God's work. I believe it's God's work that we're doing as well too. So, I have a number of colleagues that I've really bonded with over fishing, and talking about our work, and And
Absolutely. All right. So, what life advice do you wish you had been able to start off with?
what wise advice do I wish I'd been able to start off with? Hmm. Well, um, I think if fishing teaches me anything about faith, it's that, the scripture where God says, "My ways are not your ways," and you have to you have to be just patient often in life. Fishing teaches you that. But also fishing teaches you, like, you also have to be proactive, and you have to be, you can't just like throw a line in the water not knowing anything and expect to be successful. You have to make an effort, but at the same time, there's no such thing as, anytime you go out fishing, there's no guarantee you're going to catch anything. And I think that's what God asked us to do. God asked us to go out there and give it our best shot and let Him do the rest, and what's meant to be will be. So, that's, yeah, that's my advice, is like, you can go out there expecting one thing, but if you open yourself up, even if you don't catch anything, you're still gonna, you can reach a place where you say, well, I fish, and if I catch anything, it's a bonus. So, patience, let the Spirit do its work.
For sure. And what fishing advice do you wish you had been able to start off with?
Oh, geez. Well, the best advice that I received, and I always recommend this, especially to parents who want to encourage their kids to fish and to pass that love on, is when you're teaching your kid to fish, start off with the panfish. If you want your 4-year-old, 5-year-old to like really fall in love with fishing, don't take them, trout fishing where if you're lucky you catch 1 or 2 fish being on the water for 7 hours. Take them to a dock where they can pull out 20 sunfish in 20 minutes, and really, yeah, start off with the panfish with the little ones, and nurture that kind of joy and excitement. I think, I think sometimes parents think, well, if their kid's gonna like fishing, you gotta take them to catch the big fish. But like with a lot of things in life, you start small.
Absolutely. So let's talk bucket list. What fish sits at the top of your bucket list to catch?
Oh, I when I was a kid, there was this magazine I had that I got in my Christmas stocking, and it was there was a story in there. It was like fishing in the Caribbean, basically, and I would love to catch a huge barracuda or a marlin. That would be my bucket list. There's this one of my colleagues. He was telling me, and he went once and fished this. It's like called the Hemingway tournament in Cuba, I think. And he was describing it to me, and that would be a bucket list fishing trip for me. So that'd be one. The other bucket list would be somewhere, way up north, like I've never done like a fly in, like you're fishing somewhere so remote that you take a float plane to get there and just catch, gorgeous trout all day. And then the third bucket list is a massive muskie. There was also in that same magazine, there was a story about a guy who caught like, I don't know, I think it was at the time like some world record or national record muskie, and he landed it. It was like over 50 pounds or something, and he landed it on like 14-pound test line or something like that. And that story, like muskie, like caught my imagination. So a really big muskie's on my bucket list as well, for sure.
Absolutely. And what about fishing spots? Is there a particular fishing spot that sits at the top of your bucket list?
A fishing spot. Well, like I was saying, like, you know, deep sea fishing in Cuba, or, you know, the great north of Canada.
Awesome. All right. So with every one of our guests, we do a segment called What's Your Favorite? It's pretty self-explanatory. I'm going to ask you for your favorite in a few different categories. So to start us off, what's your favorite scripture?
Favorite scripture, Luke 4:18. You know, I came to bring the good news to the poor. That's right up there. And then the more odd one for me is the shortest passage in the Bible. Jesus wept. I think it captures so completely the humanity of Jesus, that he was
For
both
sure.
fully human and fully God.
Absolutely. So what about a particular story or parable from the Bible? Is there one of those that's your favorite?
I've always loved the parable of the mustard seed. You know, it's something that is all a great inspiration in our own work, where it can often feel like the efforts that we are making are so small in the face of so much suffering in the world, so much injustice in the world, you know, that it often feels like what we're offering is simply a tiny mustard seed. But to have that parable that assures us that, you know, that the kingdom of God is present in that mustard seed, and what God can do with these little mustard seeds that we give, is infinitely beyond what we can do by ourselves, is a great inspiration.
Awesome. So what's your favorite fish to catch?
Right now it's a toss-up between smallmouth bass and any kind of trout, but particularly brook trout. Brook trout because they're just so beautiful and so delicious, and smallmouth bass because I think pound for pound, smallmouth bass are the best fighting fish out there. The thrill of like watching a big smallie smash a topwater lure and jump like crazy as you're trying to pull it in, it's just, there's nothing like it.
Awesome. So what about your favorite fish to fish for?
Favorite fish to fish for?
Yeah.
Again, I think I gotta say the smallmouth bass.
Awesome. And what about your favorite fish to eat?
Oh, that's right now that's got to be salmon. We're big salmon eaters, and actually we just did a charter with my son. He caught his first salmon. It's pretty great. So yeah, a nice fresh salmon is about as good eating as you can get, I think.
And how do you like to cook your salmon?
Well, you know, right now my favorite way to prepare salmon is sashimi, just raw salmon. And we actually recently, the most recent time I ate salmon, my kids like learned how to prepare it, and so we had like Japanese style sashimi, and it was amazing.
Awesome. All right. So while we're on the subject of food, what's your favorite fish and snack?
My favorite, fishing snack?
Yeah, a snack to eat while you're out on the water.
Oh, out while I'm out on the water. Oh, wow. Honestly, I love to like have it's not a food. I don't know if you'd even consider it a snack, but like I love being out there fishing, and if I've got a bottle of Jack Daniels with me.
Okay, absolutely.
But snack wise, I guess it's like snack wise, man. I mean like candy. I'm a big candy fiend, so like anything with sugar in it, essentially, I'm good.
I hear you. All right, so I'm not going to ask you to give away any secret spots or GPS coordinates or anything, but what's your favorite body of water to fish on?
Geez, that's a toss up. Well, I mean, there's no fish in there now, but nostalgically, it was the pond at our farm. That's where I learned to love fishing, was at home on our pond. So that's still like, I can't fish it now. If I could, that would be the one. Otherwise, there's a lake not far away, Lake Simcoe, is where I've done a lot of great fishing as well too. It's a great freshwater lake, so many different types of species, and not far from where I live.
Awesome. And last but not least, what's your favorite time of year to fish?
Oh, I gotta say the fall. Up here, in the fall, the bugs aren't bad when you're out on the water or out in the bush, looking for the water. So, and the colors are beautiful. I love the crisp air, and the fishing's amazing in the fall.
That's awesome. So I am here in the southeast of the U.S. in North Carolina. So for y'all, what time frame are y'all looking at for fall? Are y'all like getting ready to come up on fall?
Yeah. So I like say like mid-September to late October.
Awesome. All right. Well, we are going to start wrapping things up. So if you would, let us know what's upcoming for you and for Peace and Development, or Development and Peace. Which one is it?
Yeah. So Development and Peace. So for us, we're coming up. We're obviously right now we're really focused on what's going on with the global pandemic with COVID-19. It's impacted literally, every country in the world, and for a lot of us who live in wealthier countries, that have governments that can provide support, unemployment insurance, that kind of stuff, access to healthcare. There's a lot of places in the world that don't have that, and it has a real impact. Like, how are you supposed to wash your hands, for example, when you don't have access to clean water? How are you supposed to keep physical distance from people when you live in a crowded refugee camp? So we're focused a lot on helping those communities around the world where we're involved to respond to this and recover from this pandemic. And the other big thing we're focused on is the impact of climate change, and because it's an existential threat, and the first people that suffer are the poorest. So we're focused a lot on that, on trying to help communities adapt to the impacts of climate change, and also address the root causes to work for a world where we can avoid the what the scientists tell us will be the worst effects if we don't change our ways.
Absolutely. So, do you have any sponsors or supporters you'd like to give a shout out to?
Well, I'd like to give a shout out to all the Catholics out there in Canada who financially support all of our work. Catholics from coast to coast, from Newfoundland to British Columbia, people who, give by the widow's mite, like we're able to do what we do because of, so many people giving their $5 here, their $10 there. And so just to the whole Catholic community in Canada that continues to support our mission, support our work, and join us in it.
Absolutely, and I'll put it in the show notes, but if our listeners want to get in touch with you or learn more about Development and Peace, how do they find you?
Yeah, you can find us on the website, DEVP, like short for development.org, or if you just Google Development and Peace, or Google Caritas Canada, and we'll be your first hit.
Awesome, and do you want to plug any social media stuff?
Yeah, you can. Same thing. We're on all major social media channels: Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and our handle is DevPeace, DEVPEACE. Or again, if you just search Development and Peace, you'll find us.
Awesome. Well, Luke, thank you so much for coming on the show. Really enjoyed it and really learned a lot more about Development and Peace, and really think that's an awesome program. And thank you again, and I wish you all the best, man.
Thanks a lot, Cam. It was a pleasure speaking to you today, and tight lines, as we say up here.
Another big thank you to Luke for coming on the show and sharing his story with us. To learn more about Caritas Canada and Development and Peace, be sure to check out the show notes for the link. Don't forget to head on over to the website, which will also be in the show notes, as well as a link to 413 Lure Company. Thank you all again for listening. Y'all take care, and God bless. Thanks for listening to the Faith and Fishing Podcast. If you like this episode, please give it a rating, a review, and make sure to subscribe on whatever app you're listening to so you never miss an episode. You can follow the podcast on social media at facebook.com/faithandfishingpodcast and Instagram at faithandfishingpod. Special thanks and a big shout out to our show sponsor, 413 Lure Company, to Jonathan Enthalancy for helping me write, play, and record the music for the show, and to Tyler Worrell, the graphic designer behind our amazing logo. If you have any questions about faith, I encourage you to contact a pastor in your community. Thanks again for tuning in, and until next time, get out there and catch some fish, and I will catch you on the next episode.